Tom, it'd be awesome to get started with a little bit of your journey into the world of veganism. What's brought you here?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me. So I guess it all started really with how I was raised, and that was as a vegetarian, which at the time, being born in the 80s, was somewhat unusual. A lot of raised eyebrows when I would tell people that. And, you know, the funny thing is, back then as well, it was harder to be a vegetarian, I think, than it is to be a vegan now, which is interesting. Because people sometimes say like, oh, veganism, it's too difficult, it's too hard. And I was thinking, should have been a vegetarian like 30 odd years ago. That was hard. But I always had it, because I was raised that way, I always had a really deep, what I considered a deep connection to animals. And, we had dogs growing up, and weirdly, actually, so when I was as a kid, at the time now, obviously, I look back at this and it doesn't sit right with me. But as a kid, it did, because I didn't really understand it. But my dad used to run a zoo, so he would sometimes, like, it was like a small holding animal zoo, and what that meant was he would they'd have a lot of rescue animals there and stuff. So a lot of it was quite nice what they were doing, but obviously I still fundamentally now absolutely disagree with the concept. But he would bring these animals back home, and so like at one point we had a monkey in our house, and then we had a penguin in our house that my dad would have to hand rear, because one of the penguins had 2 baby chicks and they'd abandoned one, so it would die. So my dad had to bring it back, hand rear, then it got reintroduced to them and stuff. And as a kid, I mean, that stuff was amazing.
Yeah,
because you don't really think about, I suppose, the other side of it, or you don't think about the animals are actually in captivity. So obviously, as I say, I look back at that now and it makes me quite uncomfortable, the whole concept. But as a kid, I think what it actually probably did was gave me a greater love for animals. And so at some point, as the years passed, I was exposed to the horrors of like the egg industry and the dairy industry. And I was probably like an ignorant vegetarian up to that point, in that I'd never really considered veganism as a concept because I thought I was doing enough. And that kind of changed my whole world and really changed the way I look at, we'll look at the food system going forward, look at our relationship with animals. And from there on, I've basically been a vegan. So that kind of started from 2015. And I would say officially in 2017, I identified as a vegan. I made sure that everything in my life, be it clothes, be it products or food, was cruelty-free to the absolute best of my ability. And that's kind of got me to where I am now, I would say.
Looking back, and it's a fascinating sort of journey, especially the aspects of like a zoo and penguins and all kind, like just an amazing kind of like journey into it. But thinking about that concept of being a vegetarian and I'm doing enough. When you look back, did you encounter folks, whether they labeled themselves vegan or otherwise, but folks who were kind of almost pushing you to think wider, to do more? And can you remember like any having any kind of reaction to those folks, like thinking, well, no, that's too extreme? Was that kind of in your journey somewhere?
Yeah, I don't think it was really, because I think people viewed me then as the extreme one,
right?
Because I grew up in a little seaside town, and so we didn't have much of anything going on really. So I was probably, me being a ginger kid and being a vegetarian, were as weird as it got. So I was probably like, I was the closest thing to diversity, I think, in that town.
Right.
And so, I certainly for a long time, I think not until my teenage years, I had even really heard of the term veganism. So it was, and that was actually because my dad gave up dairy like decades ago, and he was on the path to veganism quite a lot before I was. But I suppose I probably looked at what he was doing as quite extreme at the time, because back then, I mean, I don't know how long you've been on your vegan journey, but there was a period where the alternative milks were terrible, and my dad's an avid tea drinker, and he was rotating through trying to find the best replacement for cow's milk, and he found one called rice milk, because it was way before Alpro and everything, and Oatly and all of that. And this rice milk was basically, you had to use like a full jug of it just to make your tea change colour. Like it was the most horrendous looking thing, and you'd have bits floating in your tea. And I remember looking at that and thinking, "Oh yeah, I couldn't do that."
That's really, really fascinating. Like, yeah, having that kind of experience, because I guess like to folks, and you know, we'll get onto the film and stuff so in a bit, but I guess to folks, you know, who are not vegan at the moment, that they may still, even though we know the world is a lot easier now than it was then, but I imagine that's probably still in some people's minds. You know, the kind of the stereotypes of all we're eating is leaves and grass and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of a fascinating like journey in thinking about you know, the growing up as vegetarian. Like you said, you were the diversity in your small town and things like that. Do you think that that's kind of prepared you for how to have conversations with kind of non-vegan folks nowadays? Do you think that you kind of, as a result, had a long runway into where you are at now in terms of conversing with folks who have a completely different worldview?
Yeah, I would say so. I probably didn't realize it at the time either, but it did set me on an interesting path, and it's made my own journey quite, I suppose, a somewhat unique one. And but I definitely, because I mean, I can draw on some of those experiences, and like I briefly mentioned before, when because people still do say it's difficult and it's extreme and it's too challenging to, like, what do you even eat? Like, I still frequently get people ask me that, and so obviously it's quite nice when I can be like, well, not only can I tell you the abundance of foods I do eat now, let me tell you what it used to be like.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think all of it's, I suppose, helps you in some way in how you communicate with others, because that in itself is a real skill as well, isn't it? Because there's so many times you can try and talk to people, and some people are amazing at this as well, and some people I think are terrible at it. And I don't know what I am myself personally, but like there's definitely a right way and a wrong way to try and connect or engage someone on the topic of veganism. And the approach I've learned, or I think I found that works quite well, is finding what matters to them, because somebody has something that they'll be interested in, whether it's the fitness angle or whether it's the welfare side of things or the environment. You sort of narrow it down there and find the particular niche that you know that will resonate with them. And then you've typically got them, I think, or at least you've got the opportunity to have a conversation there. So like I say, I think it's an art form, and I think it's something I'm still constantly trying to work on to figure out the best approach there.
Thinking about like filmmaking, let's just get into that, because what was the kind of journey into that like? Because, you know, were you an avid sort of cineast from young? You know, where did it begin?
Oh yeah, I was two of the things that I'm absolutely obsessed with in life is film and music, and I always knew, like, I was the only things really I thought I would do would be either working within film or working in music in some form. And I think from a young age, film started to take over a bit. So I always played guitar, and I always sort of played in bands and stuff. But yeah, that was just also chaotic, and I could never picture that as a career. Whereas there was something about film where I realized I could go to uni and actually study film, and then I could actually just pick up a camera and go and make films. And I just felt more drawn to that. And as I say, I was absolutely obsessed with films. I used to have the biggest video collection you can imagine when I was a kid. It saddens me to think that I had to get, you know, I don't even know where they are. They're destroyed somewhere, but probably worth something now as well. But that slowly changed to DVD, and then obviously Blu-rays and whatnot. But yeah, film it's been something that's, I don't know, it's like my go-to for if I need picking up, or if I feel like I just need to lose myself in something. And now working in the film industry, it's kind of changed into, it's what I dive into something that if when I'm obviously wanting to create, and that just serves a whole other purpose for me.
Yeah.
And it's just a really interesting job to have, I think, because I remember going back to like growing up in a very small town as well. I remember when I said, "Oh, I'm going to go to uni and I'm going to go and study film," and I remember people's responses to me were just like, "Well, that's not a career. You know, what are you thinking? You can't go and do that." It's like, well, you need to get a real job, and so I was like, okay, well, I'm still going to go and try and do this. But that was kind of the mentality of where I grew up, I think. But then at some point, what I really liked is that I was able to combine my other big love, which is veganism, and sort of bring that into the work I do in film. So I slowly got into like activist films. I was partnering with a lot of big organizations who were making really great films around animal welfare or environment and that kind of thing. And then that eventually led me to I Could Never Go Vegan, which is obviously the documentary we have coming out, which was a massive 3.5-year undertaking, which I had no idea it would be as challenging as it was. I think I would have done it because, you know, it's totally worth it, but it was definitely hard work.
What sort of got you onto the path of I'm going to make a documentary? Because, you know, I can understand, obviously, you know, being vegan and being a filmmaker yourself, the two kind of naturally go together. But with the same token, there's a ton of vegan films out there. There's lots of documentaries and so on. As you said, it's not an easy thing to to undertake. So what kind of made you think, you know what, this is a space I have a story to tell in?
Yeah, I think actually what it probably was because of my own journey and upbringing, and because I've been raised, you know, without ever eating meat. I thought, wouldn't that be an interesting angle to present? Because there are a lot of vegan documentaries, you're right, but I thought this is potentially something that at least myself, I've never quite witnessed it and like told in this way before. And then I brought my brother on board. So I work a lot with my brother, he's a producer and a screenwriter, and he's really good at kind of like bringing through a narrative and helping sort the structure and that sort of thing. And he was like, "What if you kind of phrase it as I Could Never Go Vegan, because it's a pretty catchy title and will stand out to either side." And he's like, "And what if you're talking about all the arguments that you've heard growing up," because he was raised the same as me as a veggie. And so we kind of then, it became our story, and it's like, okay, so I'm going to put myself on this journey, and I'm literally going to reflect on all the arguments I have heard, like legitimately things that people say to me, and then go, and each argument will take me to a different person, a different professional in their field, and they can effectively debunk what I've been told, and we can go in, whether it's health, whether it's to do with environment, land use, water use, whether it's sports related, and I'm going speaking to all of these various different athletes, whatever it might be, it'll send me on the path, and then it kind of comes full circle where I do this big journey, and then we get to the end of the film. And once we'd got that nailed down, we thought, actually, this could be really cool. And so that really just set us on the path of making the film. And yeah, I mean, little did I know it would take so long. I'd heard documentaries of this scope do kind of take a ridiculously long time. And particularly because we had a pandemic in the middle of it all, that didn't help. We had to strip interestingly though, we had to strip the crew back, like, to get things really small, because it was, you know, we just couldn't film with a big crew, which was fine for us though, because we didn't have a big budget. And for most of it, it turned into just me and James, my brother, who we were going around, and we were going to if we use Shireen Kassam as an example, who's one of the most like amazing people I've ever met. Shireen, I love the work she's doing. So for Shireen, it would just be a case of going to Shireen's house, setting up, filming, and then sort of spending a few hours just chatting and drinking a tea and having some vegan food, and then going home. And it turned into this really lovely experience. And that's kind of what we did with everyone. So we almost made it actually, we're going to keep this super informal and laid back, and we basically formed these wonderful friendships with everyone who's in the film because we filmed it in a different kind of more personal way, where we didn't turn up with like this huge crew and just take over their entire house and rig it up with everything. And so it was an interesting experience, to be honest, but one that like I reflect on it now and I just like, really miss going on that journey, because it like was a journey for us making it as well. And obviously deep into post-production now, which has been a whole other experience, a bit more stressful. I'm not going to miss that as much. But yeah, it should be, I'm pleased to say anyway, it should be coming out in the very not too distant future. So we're at the very, very final stages, gone through all the legal sign-offs that we have to go through, which took months upon months. Given some of the footage that's in there and things, which not giving too much away, but I'm sure you can imagine there's some things, there's investigations and all sorts. So we had to, there was various hoops we had to jump through, but it's looking promising for release very soon.
Oh, I can't wait. I really can't. That fascinates me, that idea of you having to strip things back, the kind of, often, creativity, is, I think, brought to the fore, kind of, expanded by, constriction. Constraint is kind of a friend of creativity, if you like. There's somebody who said that much better than I just have, but thinking about that, what you went through in that experience of making it, did you kind of, it sounds to me like the word that comes out is like community, like you've almost discovered more of a vegan community in the journey of making the film, which, when you've described that initial narrative of, what we're here to do is to debunk each of these myths that I've kind of heard over the course of my life. Did it actually end up shaping the narrative slightly differently, that actually look at this kind of abundant and diverse community that exists within veganism?
Yeah, it did a bit actually. Yeah, because and actually that was something you mentioned there is like really key for what we wanted to show. That's one thing I think a lot of the previous films maybe have had a lack of, and that's diversity. And one thing we were keen was to show it almost to be like a current snapshot of modern day Britain, and we're really, really proud of like how that's represented in the film. And like we really do have a huge variety of people from all walks of life, sharing their own story and advice and opinions on certain topics. So we're really happy with that. And yeah, and I think when you mentioned community as well, it does feel like we sort of built this huge community, and it's so lovely because I mean, various projects I'm doing now, I'm working with these people who I filmed, and then have just, as I mentioned, formed these amazing friendships with, and it's strange to me to think now, like none of that would have happened really. If I hadn't have picked up that camera and just gone out and got that first bit of footage 3.5 years ago. So yeah, it has been such an interesting experience, and I think you're right as well. When you're making anything like this, like a documentary, things do change as you're going through it, because something might happen, a new bit of literature might be published, and it might actually shape or change an argument slightly, which can also be very annoying, by the way. We've had to change some things, even up to literally like sort of a week or two ago. We had to take something one stat out because it had changed slightly, and I'm like, really? It's quite easy to see why. When these films come out, people then make videos about them and like, oh, well, they got this wrong. It's because things change all the time. It's so difficult. And it's almost like you have to sort of caveat it by saying this was accurate at this date.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're watching 2 years on, things may change. But definitely there's a real community that we felt like we were a part of while making it, and that's also what I love about veganism. Is it is its own community, isn't it? Like everybody's so passionate. Everybody so wants to help so much. Like everyone in the film, I Can Never Go Vegan. Nobody got paid to feature in there. They do it because they absolutely love what they're doing, and they want to share this message. And I mean, that's amazing. Like you can't ask for anything more than that. And like for people to give their time and do that for free is incredible. And like, so we obviously can't thank them enough.
It sounds like you did, but did you learn quite a bit in this process? Because look, you've been vegan for a fair while. You've been vegetarian for much longer. You've been in and around these kind of arguments and these debates for a long time. And like you said, yourself and your brother are shaping the kind of narrative. You go into a documentary with some kind of plan, although you've got to be agile and, like you say, a bit fleet of foot when it comes to things changing and so on. But was there anything that really kind of stood out to you where you thought, you know what, actually, I didn't have a clue about that, or that is a subject that I thought I knew and now I discover I didn't?
Yeah, to be fair, there were a few moments like that. So because I've been vegan a while, I felt like I had a good grasp of the health side of things, because that's one of the things I really dove into when I first became vegan, because I was just quite fascinated by it all. And kind of similar with the welfare side, because it was the welfare stuff really that made me basically change overnight, because once you've seen that stuff, you can't ever justify it. The thing that's the part for me that I really learned a lot about was the environmental side of things. And we were fortunate to have some really great experts cover some great topics there. Amir Kassam, who's actually Shireen's dad, and George Monbiot, who is a really prolific figure and really well spoken in this subject. We got him at the right time because he'd just written his book, his latest book, and as a result, he was just filled with knowledge, and he had all the stats. He didn't even want any questions up front. He didn't need anything. He was like, nope, just turn up, film me. He's like, ask me anything you want and I'll answer. And he just reeled everything off, and it was incredible. And I mean, we could have made a whole film just with George, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I learned tons, and so much that like we had to leave out as well, just because we couldn't fit it in the film. But there was so many stats that he threw out that I was quite shocked by, and I was like, I didn't really know that. So that bodes well, because I feel like I've been a vegan a long time and feel like I know quite a lot about this. But if even I'm sort of learning on this as well, that's really cool. And I have to give obviously a big shout out to my brother here again, because although I planned the story with James, he actually wrote the screenplay. And a lot of people don't realize a documentary has a screenplay, because you think of screenplay for like narrative fiction.
Yeah.
But he, the hours and hours that he spent like just putting all the studies together and having to go through everything and making sure it was worded just right. So, it was saying what it needed to. We weren't going to face criticism and all of this. Like, I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for him. So when he'd send me back the screenplay after we'd done every draft, I was like, oh, that's an interesting stat. Or sometimes I'd be like, oh, that doesn't make sense, James. I don't know why you've written this. If I don't understand it, I don't think the audience will understand it. But yeah, so there was definitely some things, mainly in the environmental section. But there was also a lot with regards to just the process of making it. I learned loads about that, because it was the first feature doc I'd made. So feature length, it's going to come in at about 97 minutes.
Right.
And that in itself was a huge experience, because, like, for example, the length it takes to go through legal sign-off. If you'd have told me we'd have been battling for 4 or 5 months just to get sign-off on a little piece of paper, I'd have been like, what the hell are you talking about? Why? So things like that. That's been a big lesson.
I was going to ask about these, and you touched upon it just then about you're chatting to George Monbiot and having to leave out things, and then there's the legal aspects and so on, and there's the runtime, and there's all these kind of aspects, and the kind of and I'm just thinking of this from the podcast editing experience, which is nothing like making a feature film, far easier. But I know to a tiny degree the pain of editing. What was that process like the editing process, and trying to choose things that you knew would resonate with an audience, and then thinking about which audience we want this to resonate with, because I'd imagine there's an element of you've probably got in the sort of the virtual cutting room 3 or 4 versions of this film, I know I can envisage a film that speaks purely to vegans and is preaching to the choir. I can think of a film that's the complete opposite, a film that's total clickbait. There's so many versions you could make out of the same kind of journey. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, difficult. Like it's the hardest thing I've ever had to edit in my life. Like, I mean, it's been such a huge process in post production. I mean, we were editing it before we'd finished filming, and the only reason we started that is because we had to make a dent, and we had so much footage to go through, and we were just trying to get ahead of ourselves to give ourselves a bit of chance where it wouldn't take months upon months, which it ended up taking because it was just so enormous, to the point where like 6 months after you've started editing, you're still making changes because you keep going back to it. And I mean, the first cut was over 2 hours long, which was like, we did that and we were like, at one point I just sort of looked at James and I was like, maybe we just have to make a 2-hour film. And then everyone around us was like, you can't do that. I'm like, oh damn. Okay, so we did some private audience test screenings, and for them we'd got it down to about 1:50 by then. And then the whole purpose was we wanted the audiences to come in, and it was a real good mix as well of vegans, non-vegans, and then sort of flexitarians in the middle. And weirdly, what we found from the test screenings is we had a huge impact on the non-vegans, which is exactly what we wanted, because obviously they're the people we're trying to reach at the end of the day. And I mean, to the point where people were writing on the feedback forms like, "I'm going vegan, I'm doing it," and I was like, "That's amazing! This isn't even the finished film."
Wow, that's incredible.
But those test screenings were so valuable because people basically gave us the feedback we needed to cut what we needed to cut. So off the back of that, we then got another 10 minutes off. Then we went through another round of feedback, got another 10 minutes off, and finally got it to where we're at now, where it feels really polished at 97 minutes, which we're happy with, because that seems a reasonable length of time for people to invest in something like this. And because it is such it feels slightly different to the other vegan films in that we tackle so much. It's like, we don't want it to feel like it's so rushed that you don't get the full sense of the scope of it all. But at the same time, we don't want people to feel like they're spending their entire life watching this film. So we think we've struck a good balance now. But in terms of, I mean, I would go as far to say, going back to the editing, I don't think I'll ever edit anything as difficult as this in my life. Like, it was such an ambitious first documentary to make. Part of me wonders like what we were ever thinking, because there's when you interview so many people and you've got so much footage to capture, and you go into so many different places, but you're having to do it as such a tiny crew. Like, the whole process is so difficult, and then so when piecing it together in the edit, you're kind of thinking, well, I've got 5 different takes from people I could use here. Which one do we use? And then it's almost like, I mean, I suppose that's a good problem to have, but it's still it does cause a bit of a headache for you when you're thinking, I can't even begin to put together who needs to go in this bit, and then how this transitions us to this bit. And sometimes you just, you feel like you're banging your head against the wall trying to figure it all out, but you just keep chipping away at it. And then eventually it's patience. That's what I've learned. It's patience. You've just got to keep chipping away, getting feedback, returning to the room again, and repeating the process. We got there in the end.
Has it put you off the process? Can you see another documentary in the pipeline? Has it whet your appetite, or perhaps put you off?
Well, so I am directing a second feature documentary at the moment, but it's so much easier because it's so much more stripped back compared to what we did with I Can Never Go Vegan, which is nice. That's what I needed for the next project. I definitely didn't need something as big as I Can Never Go Vegan, just because I think it would have done me in. That would have been me out of filmmaking. But so it's not killed the process for me, but it's definitely made me maybe think about what my next project was going to be. That's not to say I would never return to something like I could never go vegan though, because I think once you've had a few months away, you forget all of the stresses and you just think about the good stuff, don't you? So
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll do something like it again. And as I say, most of what I do will be in the vegan space anyway.
Yeah. Do you think there's space for veganism to show up in other forms? I'm thinking there's been some recent fairly high profile example actually of sort of veganism in a sort of fictional space in a film, and but it's fairly isolated. There's not many kind of fiction based with vegan themes kind of films. Do you think that's an avenue you'd explore at some point?
It's funny you mentioned that. I actually have an idea that I really want to pursue, where I won't go into too much detail, but basically it's a show, and the show isn't actually about veganism, but veganism's a common theme, like a thread throughout everything. And it's never actually mentioned, but it's just there and it's present. And the reason for that is because it's just, I want to normalize basically the idea of veganism to people. So when an audience is watching this, they're aware that it's there, and they're like, even if it's ingrained in their subconscious, it's not so aware, but they have an understanding of its presence. It's like, oh, these people are just doing normal things, but they're enjoying vegan food, and it's like, oh, okay, we don't have to make a thing about that. We don't have to highlight it. It'd be nice to have that sort of thing, I think, definitely, because I don't really feel like that exists too much now.
No.
Even in some of the vegan books, I think it's still probably a bit more about that, whereas it's not just making it a whole normal experience for people.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. There's usually the intention is to talk solely about veganism as opposed to showing veganism as just a normal thing that people do. And that's kind of interesting, because I think that's a whole new avenue to help demystify and kind of make it more approachable for folks and things like that, rather than them thinking, okay, well, if I join the cult of veganism, then this is who I need to become, and I need to be an advocate for it. Now, most of us who are in that world, of course, we're quite happy to be that, and I certainly am. But I can when I think about my non-vegan sort of friends and family, one of the things that sort of concerns them almost is that it changes who they are, and sort of showing that in fictional form that actually these people they are people who have all the same woes and joys and all the rest of it, but are vegan. I think that's a fab idea. I look forward to that one, and maybe less difficult to edit than than a documentary.
Yeah, I hope so.
Turning to running on plants, because you're involved in that. Where did the sort of passion for running and running great distances come from?
Yeah, so that actually started at a young age as well. I think the closest city to where I grew up was Hull, and I used to run for the City of Hull Athletics Club. And I joined at 8 years old, and I remember this really well because I was a year too young, basically. But they let me join the under-11s a year early, and this was because my older brother, and my dad both ran, and I, being like sort of looking up to them, I was like, I want to run as well. I want to do this, and so they basically gave in and let me join. And so I've been running pretty much ever since then. I've stopped here and there along the way, but as a kid, like, I had some good, some pretty successful wins. I got some pretty somewhat prestigious medals, I suppose. I got a bronze medal at the Northern Cross Country Championships, which I was quite happy with. That was probably my highlight. And then it's been something because it was always a part of my childhood, a bit like being meat free. It sort of shaped who I was, and it's always been with me. And it's like my go-to therapy, I suppose. Whenever it really does provide me with like clarity. It clears my head. It just gives me a huge runner's high. And anytime I go out, like, I get such an enormous sense of, oh, I just love running. I love being out here and move my body in this way. It makes me feel so good physically, mentally. particularly if you go and run on the trails, which I know not everyone can do, sadly, but if you can, like, there's something about just being out in the open country and just running on those trails, and it's like a feeling of freedom. That's how I'd probably describe it. And it's one of those things. Unless you're a runner and you've experienced that, it's kind of hard to explain why it's so addictive. And so the idea for running on plants was to try and basically give people a chance to experience that and encourage and motivate them, but also give them tons of resources. So what we're trying to do is have people on the 1st of June log a 5K. And this is effectively to set a benchmark time so they can see where they're at. So they've got like, right, this is where I am. This is what I'm going to try and build on. Then throughout June, we supply people with a training plan. So it can be a beginner, intermediate, or advanced, and it can be adapted as well to suit people's ability. And then we've got a huge amount of nutritional information on the website on runningonplants.org. So we're partnered with plant-based health professionals, and we're partnered with Switch for Good in America. And there's some great resources there. So whether you're looking for fact sheets from plant-based health professionals, which talk just around basically how to avoid chronic disease and the best foods to do that, and the foods to fuel you for running and that kind of thing. Or with Switch for Good, we've got like this huge plant-based playbook, which is more on the elite side of things, but it's a fascinating read. It's enormous as well. And it's talking about these Olympic vegan athletes from various disciplines and what they were doing to thrive in their sport. We've also got the loads of recipes, delicious food, because that's obviously a thing that people struggle with, is like the food to cook, and there's tons of whole food recipes. So you're really giving your body the food it needs. And then a whole load of other resources as well, and videos, that kind of thing. And the idea is through the month of June, people can take all this on, and then at the end of June, they'll log a second 5K and hopefully celebrate when they absolutely smash their time. And it's like, wow, I can't believe how good I feel. And, I'm eating these whole plant foods. I'm running. I never thought I'd be doing this. And they, want to continue with this lifestyle.
So the campaign now sort of launched and out in the world, and folks are kind of aware of it, and we're approaching the sign up date and so on and so forth. Have you seen much kind of interest from folks? Have folks kind of come to you, perhaps weren't vegan, were perhaps looking for a way in? Have you heard any of those kind of stories?
Yeah, it's been going pretty well so far. Obviously, I really want to drive as many sign-ups as possible. So, but definitely seem to have had a good mix. I've noticed there's a lot of people as well who are sharing and encouraging their friends to join up with them, which I think is really great, because I think that's a good way to try and stick with it as well, to try and do it with somebody, motivate someone. I mean, it's a bit more of an ask than, like, say, Veganuary, because we're not just asking people to change what they're eating, we're asking them to actually take up running as well. And a lot of people don't like running, which is why we are keen to encourage people. If you can't run, say you've got an old injury, or say there's another issue, perhaps walking, is fine. Moving your body. We're encouraging people just to get outside and move, because there's so much evidence that just doing that alone is so good for our health. So we're trying to be as inclusive as we possibly can with it. Or even if you want to cycle your way through it, for example, my uncle can't run because of an old injury, and but he cycles a lot. And I said to him, sign up, just get cycling. I'm not going to hold it against you because you're not running. But so far, we've had a good mix of what I think would be vegans and non-vegans. It's one of the questions we ask when people sign up, so we can actually look at that data at the end as well, which I'll be really interested to do, just to get a sense of, how many people actually have come from a non-vegan lifestyle and have taken this on, which will be really cool. So still a couple of weeks before we kick off yet, so I'm still hoping to keep driving the sign-ups and get people involved to take part. And honestly, I think people will enjoy it more than they realize. And I say that for the people who perhaps don't like running, because I think people only don't like running just because they've not got to a point where they've really experienced like the beauty of running. Because running's hard at first. It really is. Even if I'm working away for a bit and I miss a lot of training, and then I get a run in, I feel awful. And I'm like, oh, what's happened to me? But
Yeah.
give it 3-4 runs into sort of training again, and all of a sudden it's starting to click. Couple of weeks in, and then you're starting to think, oh yeah, this is feeling so much easier than it was. It's just consistency. That's really all it is. And it's when you get to that point that you really start to enjoy running, I think. So it's just trying to encourage people and motivate them to get to that point so they realize that they love this. Because you can't put a price on feeling good. Nothing is as good as feeling healthy, in my opinion. And that's, as I say, that is what we want people to experience when they take part in this challenge.
I think, we talked about over the course of this chat various ways to kind of communicate veganism, if you like. And I think that, this is just another way, and a fantastic one too, that will inevitably, if you go on any form of training plan like this, and certainly if you, like you say, you discover the joy of running, you will absolutely feel the benefit. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I similarly went on a kind of journey similar to this a while back with running, and it was actually before I went vegan, and I really thought there is no way I can run more than a mile. Like, it's just not possible. And like you say, it's all about the slow build up. I remember starting with half a mile and thinking, pleased I've managed to do that. I didn't think I could run that far. And then before you know it, you're doing a 5K, a 10K, half marathon, and then a marathon. And, these things, they do sort of, it creeps up on you. But I also share that you don't do it for a little while. And it is a little painful to get back in, but it does come quickly again. It can come back. So, but certainly, like, from a mental health standpoint, and this is a personal perspective, but, like you say, the clarity, the sort of, there's a process. I think your brain kind of sorts out what's been going on. It's almost like a subconscious reset. I find, like, it just helps me to order things that are somewhere in my mind, and I haven't necessarily been thinking about them. A bit like, I guess, how when you sleep, that sort of does a similar kind of thing. I find that with running, there's a sort of a cathartic organization process going on in your brain whilst you're running. It's that can't really be replicated by many other things.
Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly there. You're absolutely right. And that's what I mean by, it's one of those things you have to experience that, don't you? Because it's quite hard to explain that to someone as well. Because, like, my wife, for example, like, hates running, like, absolutely hates running. And I've tried my best to get her into things. Even I've made some mistakes along the way, I will admit. Like, I signed her up for a 15K in the Lake District, and she hasn't run since then. So that was a terrible idea.
That could do it, yeah.
Just out of the blue, I was like, right, I've got a surprise for you. And she was probably thinking of something really nice. And I was like, we're doing a 15K together in the Lake District. It's like the worst thing I could have done.
She thought you might have found an amazing restaurant to take her to, but instead you signed her up to a 15K.
Taking her out on a nice dinner. Yeah, but there's definitely something in that I really hope people will experience when they take on this challenge. I hope you sign up for it yourself then, as well, as someone who's got 100%. A bit of a background in running.
100%, yeah, because it has. So yeah, I did. I ran for a fair while, then got to like 2018, and I had a meniscus tear, and went through a whole period of physio and stuff like this, and then kind of have ultimately stopped doing it. I went to cycling, and weirdly, although this doesn't help my meniscus at all, play football and a bit of rugby and things like that, and a bit of ice hockey and stuff like that. None of which help my meniscus, but they're all good fun. But running, for some reason, is one that I haven't. In any sort to any serious degree entered back into the odd 5K, etc. But it's certainly actually, like, I was watching the Running on Plants promo trailer that you shot, and that absolutely made me think, you know what, I'm gonna venture back into this, because I do miss all of that, as you were talking about it being good for your kind of your mindset. It did take me back to why I enjoyed it in the first place. So I will be there. I'll be signed up June 1st.
Amazing, yeah. Because you can have a stressful day, say, at work, and some people might think, oh, right, I need a pint, I need something to take me out of this moment and give me some temporary time away from it, so I can actually just feel like I can recuperate a bit. But you can't beat just in those moments going for a run, because you're doing your body good, you're doing your mind good. You come back and you'll feel like a different person. You'll have forgot all the troubles of that day, and then you're sort of refreshed to crack on in a weird way. Even though you might physically be slightly tired, but you feel more refreshed mentally, and you're ready to crack on. And it's just such a wonderful thing, and it's such an easy thing to get into as well. Really, like, it might have its challenges at first, but it doesn't really cost anything running, does it? No. That's another great thing about it. Get yourself a reasonable pair of trainers. Okay, you have to buy that. I mean, I spent a long time running in kit that wouldn't even be classed as running kit. Yeah. I just, stuff that I had. And it's the same kit I've had for the last 10 years as well. Like, that's me being a classic vegan and just never buy anything new. You don't even have to run with a watch either. Sometimes I don't. I do have a watch that I can link to Strava and things because I want to check distance, which I would say is useful to have, especially if you want to accurately measure a 5K. But if you don't, just get a really cheap watch, go do a local park run. That'll be measured out for you. Pick a nice flat one if you want, try and get a good time, and job's done. It's as simple as that. It's great.
Park runs are great, like, entry point, I think, for folks. It's it feels nice and safe. Someone's measured out the distance for you. It's all organised. You get a little, a little kind of timer at the end to say what you've done. Is you can do it again the next week. Meet people there. It's a great entry point. I think I do like that as that organisation. I think they've done some good things in that space.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of park runs. I think they've got people out running, which is brilliant, and there's a community sense to it as well. I really like that aspect, and people get so invested. My father-in-law, I mean, he did over 250 of them because he just wanted to get that T-shirt, like, and he was so hooked on them. And he's like 67 now as well. So I was like, no, good on you for doing that. That's really impressive. I used to travel around to them all as well. Like, they'd make a big thing about it. They'd go to different ones each Saturday. Like, it was a huge, like, literally it was all he was focused on for about 2 years.
Talking of running at any age, and that is one of the benefits of it. I mean, we also talked about price of entry and stuff, but I caught on your Insta that you'd been on was it a 50K with a octogenarian, and that whole story kind of interested me. What was going on there? Where did that come about?
Yeah, so Paul Yude, is one of our ambassadors for Running on Plants. He's 85 years old, and he's just such an inspiration. The things he's doing, so basically he went vegan in his 60s. So he's a really great example of you're never too old to change. Mm-hmm. So he's been vegan. He had arthritis really bad in his 60s. He went vegan, and pretty much in the first month is how he describes it. His arthritis just disappeared. He's had no pain with his arthritis since, and he's 85 now. He took up running in his 80s.
Wow.
And he just, and then he just has all these crazy goals. I mean, he's trying to do 1 million press ups, and he's done about 700,000 so far, which he's done over the past 5 years or something. Every day he does press ups. And then he took up running in his 80s, as I mentioned. He wants to do 100 ultras before he's 100 years old.
Wow.
So he didn't just take up running. He just thought, I know what, I'm going to jump in at the deep end and just start doing ultras. Why not? And so I heard his story, and I thought, I want to go and do something with this man. He's amazing. And so we did a 50K for the film. So that's in I Could Never Go Vegan. Me and him doing a 50K together, which was awesome. He's such a positive person as well. Like, his mindset and his approach to life is incredible. He doesn't let anything faze him. And he recently just did a 106-kilometer challenge, which I shared a bit of a reel of that on the Running on Plants Instagram and Facebook page. And he's been picked up last week by national press, which is great, about his story and sort of promoting the campaign and things. So, which is amazing, because the stuff he's doing is, I know people you're talking almost half his age,
Yeah.
who can't do a 5K.
No.
And like it's just a real testament to the power of plants and also his approach to life and living an active lifestyle. And so, as basically, he was like honored to be an ambassador, which we were honored to have him. And we may be doing some other things throughout this month. So you possibly will spot us around on various platforms or maybe even TV. So that would be really cool because the more people that know about his story, the better.
That's amazing. Like, what a guy! What an inspiration! And yeah, hopefully, for folks listening, is it shows you there's no real barrier to getting involved, whatever you want to do. Like you say, whether you want to ride, walk, whatever, hopefully run. There's lots of great resources there. Before I let you go, Tom, you mentioned when we had a crack at recording this the first time, but we've had various technical challenges, which are all behind the wizard's curtain, as it were. Hopefully now. You mentioned that you had some potential, the 25% of other projects that you work on that are the non-vegan ones, and you mentioned horror and a passion for that. I watched the short that you made a while back for Father Time. Like I said to you before we started, I'd love to see a feature-length version of that. Can you give us any insight as to into those projects that you're working on in that space?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of horror and heavy metal. They're like two of my loves. And I think that stems really from watching. Like I remember watching Halloween when I was way too young to watch it, and terrified and excited me. And from there on, I was like, "Oh yeah, this is great." But we made Father Time just before COVID happened, actually. And we had a lot of success with that film. We actually made it as a proof of concept short because we wanted to make it as a feature-length version because we thought it would be perfect as a feature-length film. And we still absolutely plan on doing that. If we can, basically it's all about raising the funds for that now. We had a lot of success on the festival circuit. We won loads of awards. We were really thrilled with the outcome of how it did. And so that's kind of in the works. But what I've got coming up in the not too distant future, actually towards the end of this year, we're going into production on a self-contained horror, which is actually called Chasing the Devil. Basically, it's like all set in one location, and the location is a pub or a bar, and it's kind of got a bit of a Agatha Christie vibe to it, where there's a room of a bunch of eclectic strangers, people from all kinds of walks of life, and they just start dropping dead. And so it's about, what's actually going on. It's effectively like a murder mystery horror all in one place, which has its advantages and its difficulties, I will say. But really excited to get that moving because we've got the green light on that now. And we'll be going into production towards the end of the year, and it should be quite a quick turnaround. And I tell you, it'll be so much easier than making I Could Never Go Vegan. I know that.
Oh, sign me up! That sounds incredible. Can't wait to see that one. Murder mystery plus horror, self-contained. I love the whole premise. That's awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah,
Tom, it's been great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time. I encourage everyone to get on the running on plants Insta and the socials and so on, and follow the website. Sign up. We'll put all the links in the show notes so folks can know about that, and also links to I Could Never Go Vegan Insta and the website, so folks can stay up to date with the release date. Hopefully soon, fingers crossed. But Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've loved chatting with you, sir. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Cheers, Tom.